Good afternoon, students. Well, let's start on material that is included in your next quiz, and the quiz is directly from this video. And the video is also a precursor to you answering those questions and looking at your reading. So by the time you go through my video, you answer the headings, you take the 30-minute quiz, you can have your notes. You do want to have your notes in front of you. By the time we get back to class, and then you've reviewed your questions in the handout, then you should be very knowledgeable, and we can actually go through the material pretty quickly, and then you can ask any questions you're not clear on. So again, go ahead and download the skeletal outline of questions and follow the format of the video. That will be the format of the quiz, and you should be fine. So let's get started. What we want to do first of all is I think we should review some of points about Hegel, since we're talking now about the next philosopher, Martin Heidegger, who's very, very important, as well as Hegel. But I think we need to also discuss or revisit some statements that we talked about, some ideas that we talked about, which is, what does that mean? Because philosophers are often talking about the nature of being. What does that mean? And we're certainly interested in the nature of art throughout the course. And what does that mean? So when we talk about the nature of being, that literally is how we see ourselves, how we exist in the world. You would say, well, what is the reality of things as we understand it? So it also includes how we obtain knowledge. So if we go back to the age of rationale, this is a review, and that is the period I keep referencing as, the Renaissance, the high beginning or the high Renaissance. Then that period of time they believed that you were born with your ideas. You were born with these ideas, you were born with knowledge, and that justifies the existence of God during that period. How could you be born with these ideas if it was not put there by God? Then we move into the period of empiricism, when you have John Locke, who says, no, we are born tabula rasa. Simply means blank slate. And so, as you know, the empirists believed that we are born without ideas, a blank slate, a blank slate, and that knowledge is acquired through our knowledge and our senses. So let's look very briefly at, why Hegel is particularly important. When he talks about how we obtain knowledge, which is part of our consciousness, our self-consciousness, our rationale. And he believed it was through our development of our human consciousness through history that we come to know, be knowledgeable. What's important for us is your question on your research question is that what three things does he think influences our knowledge? Our knowledge of reality, and he says it's philosophy, religion, and art. So obviously, as artists, that becomes very important to us to acknowledge how he places such value on art. Now, then that dovetails into how we obtain knowledge, which is the nature of being. Well, then what is the nature of art? Now, the nature of art is what we're talking about throughout the course, and it changes. The nature of art, it means different things to different people, different groups, and it changes throughout history. And the nature of art is shaped by cultural, historical, and those and other individual factors. But what becomes important for us about Hegel is his position on the nature of art, because he says art is not about pleasure, but about enhancing our understanding of ourselves and our world. He says that art is more than mimesis, more than representationalism, and it must have content. Again, he believes that art, or the nature of art, is a result of how it exists in the context, historical and cultural context, and that it changes. So that becomes very pivotal in how we as a culture begin to look at art as something very different than, say, what they looked at in the Renaissance or even the Baroque period. Now, that brings us to our new reading about Martin Heidegger. And he wrote The Origin of the Work of Art. It was first published in 1950. But he had already been given these lectures since the early 20s through the 30s. But it was published in 1950. This has an important impact, significant impact on not on aesthetic theory, and is still very influential in the nature and purpose of art today in contemporary art. So he is also a very important philosopher. So, what are the key points in Martin Heidegger's philosophy about how he sees art or the philosophy of art? Well, Heidegger says that saw art as a significant means for exploring our understanding of the nature of being. So you see, we go back full circle to which is like, what is our reality? What is our existence? And that art is a way to access those truths about the world and ourselves. So, this is repetitive. To repeat the above, he says in a different way, art has the power to reveal the truth about the essence of things. And through art, we do gain knowledge of a deeper understanding of the world we live in and our place in it. These are important points. Equally important from Martin Heidegger is that art challenges our assumptions about the world. And you can certainly see that. It's hard for me to think about Renaissance art in those terms because it was highly religious. Whereas, although we still have religious art, we also still have styles which do exactly that. They challenge our viewpoints, our assumptions, our even values about the world. Now, the questions are statements on your handout, number 8 and 9. Those are repetitive, and actually you can combine them. Number 8 is, what is Heidegger's position on representation in art? The second one is number 9. How does he challenge the notions of mimesis or the representation in art? So I'll address those separately, but as you can see, they're very similar and you could combine those. Now, just like Hegel, Heidegger's position on representation in art, as well, which is mimesis, is that he says art should not be a mere representation of nature or an object for pleasure. You could say that what does pleasure mean? Well, it could be, something decorative, maybe some ideas, someone's idea of idealized beauty, etc. Now, this is where he moves into something. There's three parts to this that we're going to build on when we talk about expressionism a little later. Very important. He says that art involves the artist, the artwork, and the audience as a way to reveal a truth. And he says art has the transformative power to shape our understanding of the world. So, again, stated in a different way, you can see the role and significance, the importance that he gives art in understanding our culture. So he rejects mimesis as well. And again, he says, no, art can reveal truths about our human condition. And he rejects the idea. We'll talk about this a little later in the in expressivism with the solo theory. I will look at that later. He rejects the artist to be the sole creator for meaning in a work of art. He says, now, remember what I said a little earlier, you have the artist, you have the work of art, and then you have the audience. So he says that the viewer creates the meaning. You have the artist, you have the work of art, and the viewer creates the meaning. That's similar to what we talked about when we talked about beauty is subjective, there is no inherent qualities. We bring that meaning to the work. So this is very similar, but he articulates, no, we need the artist, we need the object, and then we need the viewer. So he creates something very distinct. Now, he is important, and what are some of his key contributions to the field of aesthetics and theories of art? Again, I repeat, he insists on the importance of art to understand the historic and cultural context in which we live. And he emphasized an audience active engagement with the artwork to reveal the truth or the role of the viewer to create meaning. Okay? So lastly, as I bring this video to a close, every one of these points I think are very important when you reflect on it about contemporary art today. How is Heidegger's philosophy of art relevant to contemporary art and culture? The first thing is, he does not focus on the commodification of art. And that is, oh, well, we create these works to be bought and sold. But that art has its value, has a much deeper meaning. He's talking of works of art. He's not talking about commercial art. He's already separating it. Art is an object to be bought and sold. We call that commodification. No. You create it because it has deeper meaning. Secondly, he also emphasized the importance of context, that how works of art are created, they are not created in a vacuum. They are created within the culture and historical content, or context rather, historical or cultural context in which it is produced. So, for example, those in the Renaissance are produced in that historical cultural context, very different than what we're doing in 1920, 1960s, 2024. So The third point is, since his views focus on art to reveal a truth, this is the alternative to this idea that universal truths exist, universal ideas of beauty exist. So he denies that by saying that art reveals a truth. All right. Next, this encourages, therefore, art encourages thoughtful engagement with the works of art, and that we are not passive observers. When I think of that, I immediately think of Immanuel Kant, who said, to value a work of art, we have to come to the work disinterested, open-minded. We're just open to what that work is about, or what we think the work is about. So you see, we build. Immanuel Kant is very important. So we're building on these concepts about the nature of art, which earlier in the semester we touched upon it and danced around it, or how we look at works of art. But when we start with Kant, we're really building this systematic base for how art theory builds throughout each decade on how we value or what the nature of art is. And so I go back to this point. He says art should encourage thoughtful engagement. It encourages us to have thoughtful engagement with it, and we are not passive observers. He says art speaks to, he didn't say contemporary, I'm using that word. He says art speaks to contemporary concerns that are taking place. And lastly, there are many points. I'm saying that these are what I consider key points. His philosophy of art challenged those dominant ways of thinking about art that existed. So he challenged how we looked at art and how we come to the nature of art, the nature of being, and how we acquire knowledge. So all of these are interrelated in these readings. So I think that should do it. I'm not doing a retake, so I hope I was speaking slow enough where you can stop the video. And as usual, I always look forward to getting feedback from you. Does this approach work from you in looking at a quiz and preparing yourself for you doing your research on your reading? So good luck on the quiz. I'm sure you'll do well.